Welcome to Play the Game. If you enjoy tabletop role-playing games, campaign design, and thinking about why games work, then like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. It really helps the channel grow. Today I'm responding to a video from Bound, an excellent world-building channel. The specific video I'm referring to is linked to in the description. The topic is why civilizations almost always develop one city that is dramatically larger than every other city, or in science fiction, one planet that dominates the rest. This pattern is known as Zipf's law. It is an empirical fact of life, and in many ways, we are going to talk about city populations. You've got to play the game. What is Zipf's law? Zipf's law is a power-law relationship found throughout economics, geography, and linguistics. It is everywhere, but right now we're talking about the population of cities. More specifically, because the law is empirically determined, it has no basis that we know of. So that means that for every use, you have to look at it and see why it structures things as it does. The largest city tends to have a population about twice the population of the second largest city. The second largest city tends to have twice the population of the third. Bound makes an excellent observation. He notes that the largest city consumes far more than trade allows. This tells us something important. Zipf's law cannot be explained by simple market economics alone. We combine this with the fact that newly settled regions often do not follow Zipf's law. It suggests that political organization plays an equally important role. The critical factor is control over resources. Who decides where wealth goes? Who controls taxation? Who controls military protection? Who controls the law? Wherever those decisions are made, people, wealth, and opportunities accumulate. There is nothing mysterious about this. When one city controls the flow of resources, then that city naturally demands additional resources because the administration of the rest of society is expensive. Political power creates population. Economic power reinforces it. Eventually, the city dominates the entire civilization, and then the distribution of the product of that resource concentration. In a monarchy or an empire, the largest city is usually the capital. If it isn't already, it will probably become the capital once government relocates there. In democracies that do not evolve from monarchies or empires, the largest city is where the financial capital accumulates. Economic power becomes more important than royal authority. So, how do we use this in tabletop role-playing games? Don't begin by drawing the map. Begin by drawing the power. Ask yourself, where is the political power? Where is the economic power? Once you know these two answers, the cities will almost build themselves. The Neo-Assyrian state provides an excellent example of an empire, where subject rulers govern their own territories while paying tribute to the imperial center. It's a nice kingdom you have. It's a pity if something should happen to it. Bound makes an excellent observation. He notes that the largest city consumes far more than trade allows. This tells us something important. Zipf's law cannot be explained by simple market economics alone. We combine this with the fact that newly settled regions often do not follow Zipf's law. It suggests that political organization plays an equally important role. The critical factor is control over resources. Who decides where wealth goes? Who controls taxation? Who controls military protection? Who controls the law? Wherever those decisions are made, people, wealth, and opportunities accumulate. There is nothing mysterious about this. When one city controls the flow of resources, then that city naturally demands additional resources because the administration of the rest of society is expensive. Political power creates population. Economic power reinforces it. Eventually, the city dominates the entire civilization. It controls the centralization of resources and then the distribution of the product of that resource concentration. In a monarchy or an empire, the largest city is usually the capital. If it isn't already, it will probably become the capital once government relocates there. In democracies that do not evolve from monarchies or empires, the largest city is where the financial capital accumulates. Economic power becomes more important than royal authority. So, how do we use this in tabletop role-playing games? Don't begin by drawing the map. Begin by drawing the power. Ask yourself, where is the political power? Where is the economic power? Once you know these two answers, the cities will almost build themselves. In a monarchy, political and economic power usually overlap. In an empire, they may be separated. A valuable natural resource might accumulate activities to occur somewhere other than the capital. The Holy Roman Empire is a useful example. Political authority centers in the Habsburg dynasty. Economic power, however, concentrated among the great commercial cities, the coastal trade, merchant guilds, and artistic centers. This means that political gravity and economic gravity are not the same. That difference shapes a different urban network. Think Traveler in the most famous campaign setting, the Third Imperium. Why does a planet gain such power in a disorganized universe? First of all, let us see what kind of campaign this is. It is an empire. This means there will be a number of dominant planets, with the largest one being the capital of the Third Imperium. But it is like the Sumer epoch of Earth. There are constant changes, and the capital is only being primus inter pares, which is Latin for the chief boss of bosses. Instead of making maps, you are going to draw power relationships between the various cities. In a monarch, it is a person and his staff. The monarch may go on progresses to see his nobles, but he resides in his capital. And this is for the reason of escaping nobles in the capital. If you are dealing with a medieval civilization, either Western or Eastern, monarchs and empires will be the majority of the states. But if you are dealing with modern day or science fiction, you will find republics or democracies, and they come in separate categories. One is the state, which was once a monarchy, but has been converted over to a republic or democracy. London or Paris, for example. Once the monarch's capital, then the democracy built its way up in the capital. Once the monarch's capital, the democracy then stayed there. But there are democracies which are founded almost entirely under their own bootstraps, and these develop a different major city. Power flows directly from the well of capital. The dominant city is different because it is based on a different kind of power politics. Jane Brown and his key insight is called the parasite city. In Graham Brown's video, the largest city is often described as a parasite city. I think that's a useful image, but I would describe it differently. The largest city is not necessarily parasitic. It is dominant city of the civilization and needs more population than can be supplied by the local trade routes. The reason it becomes so large depends on how political and economic power are organized. Different governments produce different largest cities. Civilization without a unified state. Sometimes there is a city without a centralized government. Examples include the modern European Union, medieval Switzerland. These societies share culture and trade without having a complete political unity. Empires exercise authority over many peoples and governments. Control can vary enormously. The Persian Empire, for example, governed through satrapies, which were largely autonomous as long as the tribute continued to flow to the center. This means that there is much less pull at the capital. Kingdoms generally exercise more direct control. A kingdom may be at the center of an empire. For example, the Kingdom of Great Britain was much smaller than the Empire of Great Britain. Monarchs rule directly through nobles, although some regions may enjoy special privileges or local autonomy. In a republic, political authority is concentrated in the governing city. That city often becomes both the political and economic heart of the civilization. Democracies distribute power more broadly. although the people has had different meanings throughout history. For example, in much of the 19th century, voting rights in the United States were effectively limited to white men over the age of 21. Even democracies develop dominant cities, but the reasons are often very different. Money is the currency of the realm rather than authority. Another distinction that matters is the difference between a nobility and an aristocracy. A landed nobility derives its wealth from estates spread across the countryside. Its members are geographically dispersed because their power comes from land ownership. An aristocracy, on the other hand, derives much of its influence from proximity to the ruler. Its members gather around the royal court to compete for offices, influence, and prestige. That concentration naturally enlarges the capital city. The word empire has several meanings, so it is useful to define it more precisely for this video. For this discussion, an empire is a political system which has many rulers not related to the emperor. The Neo-Assyrian state provides an example of an empire where subjects, rulers, govern their own territories while paying tribute to the imperial center. They owe tribute or allegiance but retain a significant local authority. It's a nice kingdom you have. It's a pity if something should happen to it. The kingdom is different. In many historical kingdoms, much of the upper nobility is related to the royal family either through blood or marriage. England provides a useful example of a kingdom. But there is also the small scale. Why would people want to live in a small village? Let's go over to Wendover for the ground up. The answer is that a city or town has problems that multiply as they get larger. Houses become more expensive. Problems like alcoholism become more prevalent. Crime becomes more profitable as the number of people expands. There is also the fact that there are certain central resources that need to be shipped, and that brings the resource consumption problem. When grain is shipped over roads, it consumes some of its value, the total value to feed the animals and people managing it. This is also the case in modern times where oil is the primary means of fueling transportation, so there is demand for outside living and there are jobs. In science fiction, there will be some resource, whether it is hydrogen or dilithium, needed to fuel transportation between the stars. The cost is that things that require a number of people to execute become less common, and there is a lower amount of money from the outside. Musical theater is an example of something that you only get in large cities, except once in a while. So building up from the small scale, there needs to be whatever is used for transportation to be at periodic steps along the trail. The transportation needs fuel, whatever the fuel is: grain, coal, gas, electricity, hydrogen, or antimatter. For example, there needed to be water at the train tracks. Many of these grids overlap each other. There is fuel and food at regular points, but there are also things that need to be supplied as well. Parts need to be supplied when they are out. This means there is a larger grid for service stations. As well, there are points of transfer. Ocean-going vessels need to be moved to river-bound vessels. The ships to road, because while ships are inexpensive to move, they also can't get everywhere. This means the dominant city will draw in very specialized artisans because only in the dominant city is there enough demand for the luxuries and equipment for recording information. A college, a theater. The large problem of the Zipf curve is also matched from below. Let's take a look at a fictional world. Harn. On the main island of Harn, there are many states along with some Vikings in the north. The organization is like the Holy Roman Empire. At first, it seems that this will not work. There are two cities with about the same population. No one is a main city. But when you look at it closely, there is an empire in the east and an empire in the west. In both the eastern and western halves, there is a main city, Dashal in the east and Koronan in the west. Each of these cities is the capital of the largest kingdom in their sphere. Galdor for Dashal and Tharda for Koronen. There are several kingdoms, and in one case, Tharda is a republic, though most clearly not a democracy. The two halves break down into civilizations centered around the main states. In the kingdoms of Retham and Kandé in the west, the capital is divorced from the main city for justified reasons. Each king is too easy on the throne to make the capital their main city, but rather a fortified castle which he controls is the center. In both cases, the problem is that Galatha and Eliav, the largest cities, the clergy would overthrow the king if it got the chance. This means that there are two civilizations, centered on Tishal and Koronen, with orbiting states around them. These states have significant power, just as in the Holy Roman Empire. It also means that the only two cities of Tishal and Koronen have the power to bend trade routes to feed the population. There is also the dwarven city of Azadmir, which has dwarves as the main stakeholders. Azadmir supplies gold and other mined goods, which are unavailable in any other way. So they thumb their nose at the various human conventions because of their wealth. It needs dwarves to extract it. In Orbol, the kingdom is basically a hanger-on of Khador and Maldarin, a piracy tax on shipping, but still part of the civilization. We can also see that there is a competition for the second place city in the West, just as there are competition for third place between Chicago and Houston. In other words, a game world does not need to use the Zipf conventions and still matches what would be predicted for the imaginary world. This is because the imaginary world mimics closely the medieval world of Earth. On the other hand, think of the United Federation of Planets from Star Trek. It has not had the time to find a Zipf curve and is more like a confederation, but the Klingon Empire is formed along Zipf conventions, as is the Romulan Empire, with dilithium as the key resource. That means you can use the Zipf curve for your world if you want realism to be one of your goals. After locating the centers of power, draw your Zipf curve on a logarithmic scale. This can be Bronze Age sandals and swords, a medieval world, a modern world, or a fantasy of your own design. Most civilizations will have only one truly dominant city. Often there will be some cities which have dominant positions in their regional markets. The dominant city draws in wholesale raw materials and then ships them to the right places. When it is a monarch or an empire, the decision is made by a few key people to have some form of legitimate or illegitimate power. When it is shifting from a monarch or empire to a democracy, it probably stays within the monarch's place of residence. Only when it is a new democracy does a different layout become in place. The power centers on the market, and in some cases, the allure of one's own system as entertainment. Think of Hollywood. And there are other ridges which do not move and therefore hold a slice of power, whether it is Calgary or Azadmir or Earth in the Third Imperium. All move according to the beats of Zipf's law and the law of supply. Oil is the obvious modern example. Historically, this could include gold, silver, supplies, silk, or other strategic routes. Oftentimes slavery, under whatever name, will be practiced there to get the resource. In science fiction, it might be antimatter production, rare isotopes, jump gates, or other unique alien technology. These exceptional resources distort the normal Zipf distribution because they create independent centers of wealth and influence. These exceptions become some of the most interesting locations for adventures. The Zipf curve only holds as long as there is a political or economic reason. When such a civilization does not exist or has not existed for a very short period of time, the Zipf curve does not apply. But when it does, all society rests around it. Whether here is medieval Europe, the modern United States, Harn, the Third Imperium, or the capital of the Galactic Empire, as Asimov recounted in Trantor. Very often in a monarchical civilization, there is a place for the monarch to avoid the population, such as Versailles. In democratic civilizations descended from a monarchy, the democratic city will be the monarchical city, such as London or Paris or Moscow. Occasionally, the monarch will move the capital so he can get away from the older interests of power, such as St. Petersburg. In a new democracy, the major city will be where the capital for corporations lives. The movement of the capital is often done to break political concentration from economic concentration. Understand where power is located and why allows you to build cities that feel like they belong to a living civilization instead of filling a space on a map. Then there is the small scale, the things that need to run transportation. Often these grow larger and more expensive as tools are needed. This means, in your world, there should be a top which demands investment and a bottom which supplies useful material. Each world will have a distinct culture based on the concept of transportation and the way that transportation is fueled. That's all for today. If you enjoy this episode, please hit like, subscribe, and notify. If you have your own thoughts about Ziff's law, trade networks, or world building, leave a comment below. I'll see you next time on Play the Game. It was strange that the glory of the galaxy should be a rotting corpse.